Hello, math fans. All right, so today we're going to work on zero and negative exponents. All right, the first thing I want to emphasize is, even before we start out with any of these problems here, if you see a problem like 2x and it's in parentheses to the third power, remember what I've told you I want you to do. You need to write it as 2 to the third power and x to the third power. Each one needs to be cubed. So we get 8x cubed. That's really important, because what people do is they forget that the 2 is cubed and the x is cubed, as opposed to if I gave you 2x cubed, that 2 is not cubed. It's only affecting that x. Okay? So I just want to start that out because I think that's really important. All right, so let's talk about zero exponents. Basically, this is the deal. Anything to the zero power, so any number or variable raised to the zero power equals 1. That's it. That's what you have to know. Anything raised to the zero power equals 1. So if I give you 5 to the 0, 1. The only one that doesn't work is 0. We're not going to really talk about that. 0, 0 actually is really, it's undefined, but we're not going to worry about that. Anything to the 0 power. 565 to the 0 power, 1. X to the 0 power, 1. X to the 7th to the 0 power, 1. Okay, now remember I talked just about parentheses here. If I have 5 x to the 7th, y to the 6th to the 0 power, since it's all in parentheses, it's equal to 1. Okay, very important. So let's try a couple problems where it's not, the whole thing is not raised to the 0 power. So for example, if I give you 3x to the 0 power, you have to remember what's touching that exponent. The only thing touching the exponent is just the x. So it's really saying 3 times, well, what's x to the 0? 1. My answer is 3. Now that's different than doing this, because here everything is being raised to the 0 power, and the answer to that one is just 1. It's super important. So if I give you 5x to the 7th, y to the 0, z to the 10th, everything is normal. Nothing gets affected by the 0 except for the y. So the answer is 5x to the 7th. Well, that's equal to 1. You don't write 1 unless, of course, everything goes to 1. If you want, you could put times 1, z to the 10th, and then, of course, you don't leave it like that. It's 5x to the 7th, z to the 10th, and that's your answer. All right? So it's very important to understand that. If whatever's touching that, the 0 exponent automatically goes to 1. And I know some of you are saying, well, why does it go to 1? Why? I'm not going to explain it today. Actually, I'm going to explain it the next lesson, because I can explain it much better when we talk about division of exponents. Okay? So for now, just know that anything to the 0 power is 1. All right? Here's another good problem. Here, negative 4 to the 0 power. All right? Now, is that really 1? Actually, it's not. That's equal to negative 1. And the reason is because, just like I did back in the day, if I said negative 4 squared, remember, that is not in parentheses. So it's like saying negative 4 squared is 16, so that's negative 16. Same thing with this. Negative 4 to the 0 means a negative, and it's the 4 that we're raising to the 0 power, so it's negative 1. So you have to be careful. Negatives are a little tricky. Okay, because if there's no parenthesis on the outside or around the negative, so if it looks like this, that is saying, okay, now everything is going to the 0 power. That's 1. But if it's like this guy, the first one I did here, okay, it's just saying that 4 is raised to the 0 power, and then you take the negative of it. All right, so be really careful. So again, negative 4 to the 0 power is negative 1, just like negative 4 squared is negative 16. Very important. Okay, as opposed to that, to the 0 or squared, now it's equal to 1, and that's equal to positive 16. All right, so remember negatives. Negatives are very important, but anything to the 0 power is 1. How about this? 2/7 to the 0 power. 1. Doesn't matter. Fraction, decimal, 0.105 to the 0 power, 1. Okay, anything to the 0 power is 1. Very important. Okay, so that's pretty mellow. Let's talk about negative exponents. All right. I'm going to show you, I think it's easier just with a variable right away. But basically, if you have a negative exponent, so if you have a negative exponent to start out the problem, so negative exponent to start, what you do is you move, so 2 steps. First step is you move the variable with the exponent to the other side of the fraction. So before you get all panicky and say, well, what is he talking about, the other side of the fraction? You just write this down, and then we'll do several examples. So when you have a negative exponent to start, you move the variable with the exponent to the other side of the fraction. And the second step is make the exponent positive. Okay? So you move it to the other side of the fraction with the variable and the exponent, and you make the exponent positive. So this is the deal. If I gave you x to the negative 3rd power, that's equal to 1 over x to the 3rd power. So you move it to the other side of the fraction. So you're like, well, wait a second, there's no fraction here. Well, okay, let's make one. So I have x to the negative 3rd, x to the negative 3rd over 1. Okay? X to the negative 3rd over 1. You move it to the other side of the fraction, so I move this whole thing down to the bottom of the fraction, and I made that 3 positive. Same thing if I have 1 over x to the negative 4. I move that to the top of the fraction, so it becomes x to the positive 4 over 1, or just x to the 4th. Okay, so if you have a negative exponent, you need to make it positive. And this is actually a huge rule, so I'm going to put a big star here. Your final answer has no negative exponents. That is huge, people. Your final answer has no negative exponents. So if you have any of your answers with a negative exponent and you put that on a test, just mark it wrong all back. Just do it for me, okay? Mark it wrong because it is wrong. Okay? Every answer will have a positive exponent until we get into scientific notation, which actually is a little bit different, and you're allowed to have negative exponents. Okay? But for any problem where I say simplify, everything needs to be positive exponent. So I have got a ton of examples to do with you now, just to kind of practice that. So if I have 2 to the negative 3rd power, okay, that's a number. So what I do is I put it over 1, and that means this whole thing goes to the bottom of the fraction. So it's 1 over 2, and then the exponent becomes positive. So 2 cubed. And remember, it's another one of the rules I told you back in the day, do not leave a number with an exponent. Okay, it's very bad. Do not leave a number with an exponent. So what you need to do is do 2 cubed, so 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. My answer is 1/8. All right, so I'm going to write this out here. No numbers with exponents and no decimals. Okay, I don't want you sticking things in your calculator and come up, because the answer, the equivalent decimal, is 0.125. Okay, I do not want a decimal. If you give me a decimal, I'm going to mark it wrong. Okay, everything needs to be in fraction form. So 3 to the negative 2 power, that's 1 over 3 squared, which is 1/9. Okay? So let's kind of combine a few things. What happens if I do 2x to the negative third power? Remember what I told you before. Whatever touches the exponent gets affected by the exponent. Okay, that 2 is not touching that negative 3. So that 2 is kind of all by itself. And what you're going to do, it's over 1. And the 2 stays where it's at, because there's no negative exponent with it. And then the x cubed goes to the bottom. And that's my answer, 2 over x cubed. Notice all these final answers, I have no negative exponents, and all my numbers have no exponents also. All right, so what about 2x to the negative 3? Now, what's touching that negative exponent? The 2 and the x. So this is the deal. Everything is touching it, so I'm going to move the whole thing down to the bottom. Becomes positive 3. Now I need to finish it up here. Okay, so I put no numbers, no number with exponents, no decimals, and one more thing is your answer will have no parentheses. All right, so like this is not appropriate either, and you need to show a little work here. It's like saying 2 cubed times x cubed. So my answer is 1 over 8x cubed. That's it. Okay. So no numbers with exponents, no decimals, no parentheses. All right, so let's do several more examples here. Make sure you guys understand what we're doing. Okay, 2x squared y cubed to the negative third power. Okay, that just means it's everything in parentheses, so it's 1 over 2x squared y cubed to the positive third power. And then you distribute that cube, so it's 1 over 2 cubed. This is x squared cubed and y cubed cubed. Okay, it looks a little complicated, but you got to write all that out. And then, of course, 2 cubed is 8. This is old stuff, a power to a power. So x squared cubed is x to the 6th. Y cubed is 3 times 3. Y to the 9th. That's your answer to that problem. That was kind of complicated. Okay, but not that bad as long as you follow the rules. So here's another one for you. X to the negative third over y to the 4th. Okay, whatever's got a negative exponent moves to the other side of the fraction. Whatever has a positive exponent, it's just like normal. You don't do anything. So this is going down here. That y to the 4th is staying where it's at. You always need a placeholder, so it's 1 over x cubed y to the 4th. Okay, so that's that example. Positive exponents, we're good to go. What about this one? X to the negative 7th over y to the negative 3rd. Well, that one goes to the top, and that one goes to the bottom. So the x to the negative 7th now becomes x to the 7th, goes to the bottom. Y to the negative 3rd becomes y to the positive 3rd. And that's your answer. Y to the 3rd over x to the 7th. Okay, so whatever is touching a negative exponent moves to the other side. Everything else stays where it's at. So here, x to the 2nd, y to the negative 3rd, z to the 0. Ooh, combining a little what we just learned here. All right, if you want, draw a fraction in right away. Make it over 1, so then you say, okay, what stays on top, what moves to the bottom? So the x squared, that's on top. The z to the the y to the negative 3rd, that goes to the bottom, so it becomes y 3rd. And what's z to the 0? It's just 1. So I don't even need to write it. It goes away. Z to the 0 is 1. So my answer to this problem is x squared over y cubed. All right? So you can see there's a lot of different types of problems with these. You just have to be careful when you're working them out. So let's try another one here. 2xy to the negative third z to the fifth, and we're going to raise that to the negative second power. Okay, that's actually kind of a complicated problem. What I would do is you want to take that negative 2 exponent, and obviously you want to make a positive. So I'm going to do this. 1 over 2xy to the negative 3 z to the fifth to the positive 2 power. Okay, we still have a negative exponent there, but that's okay. We're going to deal with that a little bit later. So let's distribute that. It's 1 over 2 squared x squared y to the negative third squared and z to the fifth squared. So that's going to give us 1 over 4 x squared y to the negative 6. Remember, you're multiplying these exponents, and z to the 10th. Now, if you think you're done, you're not. And why are we not done? Because you still have a negative exponent there. So the only thing left to do is take that y to the negative 6th and move it to the top. So y to the positive 6 over 4x squared z to the 10th. That's it. That's your answer. Okay. So that was a pretty tough problem. Let's do a few more problems here. 2x to the fifth, y to the negative 7th, z to the negative 10th. Okay, what goes the other side of the fraction? Just the y and the z. That's pretty easy. So it's 2x to the fifth. On the bottom is y to the 7th, z to the 10th. That was actually pretty mellow. Okay, what about 7x to the negative 4th? Again, that 7 is not being touched by that negative exponent. So it's 7, and on the bottom becomes x to the 4th. Okay, it's pretty mellow here. So 2x to the negative 1 to the negative third power. All right, so I'm going to do this first. And that's to the positive third power. And then you deal with the exponent again. So that's equal to 1 over 2 cubed x to the negative 1 cubed. So that gives us 1 over 8 x to the negative third. Are we done? Of course not. We still have a negative exponent, so that moves to the top of the fraction. So it's x cubed on top, and the bottom is 8. Okay, pretty mellow. How about x to the negative 7th over z to the 15th power? So what's the only thing moving? This is the only thing moving. It's got a negative exponent, so it's 1 over x to the 7th, z to the 15th. Okay? It can get a little more complicated. Not even that. Here, let's do a new page here. So 2 over 3x to the negative 4th, y to the 6th, z to the negative 7th. Okay, what is the only thing that's being moved? That 2/3 is actually hanging out there. That's not touched. That y to the 6th, that's where it's at. The x goes to the top, x to the 4th. The z goes to the top, z to the 7th. And that's your answer. So it's 2x to the 4th, z to the 7th over 3y to the 6th. All right, so looking good so far here. 1 over 2 to the negative third power. Well, you should say, I guess it's got to go to the top of the fraction. So it's 2 to the third power over 1, or 2 to the third, and that's equal to 8. Okay, 2 to the negative second power, and raise that to the second power. So what do? Couple things we can do with this. First of all, why don't we just multiply that out? Because isn't a power to a power? If that was a negative 2, you could still multiply it out. That's why there are different ways to do these problems. But I'm just going to do 2 to the negative 4th power. And then I'm going to say, well, that's the same thing as 1 over 2 to the 4th power, which is 1 over 16. What happens if I got 2 to the negative 2 to the negative 2? Well, that one's actually really nice because you multiply these together, so it's 2 to the 4th power, which is 16. Okay, that looks pretty reasonable. And let's see, what else? Let's try another one. X to the negative 7th over 3 to the negative 3rd power. Again, looks a little complicated, but it's not. Remember the rule. Negative exponents move to the other side of the fraction, so it becomes 3 to the 3rd power. On the bottom, x to the positive 7. No numbers with exponents, so 3 cubed. Don't say 9. It's not 3 times 3. It's 3 times 3 times 3. So that's 27 over x to the 7th. Okay? And what about this one? 9 over 3x to the negative 2nd power. Okay? Again, looks a little complicated, but what I'm going to do is that 9 is where it's at, and that other part, so I'll draw the fraction. You can do that. That's going to move the other side, so 3x to the positive 2, which is really, I don't need this bottom now, if you recognize that, right? And remember that the only thing that's being squared now is the 3, not the 9. So it's the same thing as saying 3 times, well, I'm sorry, 9 times, and then 3 squared, x squared. So it's equal to 9 times 9, x squared, or 81x squared. That's your answer. Okay? Pretty mellow. Let's try another one here, kind of similar to that. 4 over 2x to the negative 3rd. Okay, what's touching that negative exponent? And you notice, if there's no parentheses around there, the only thing that's touching is the one next to it, the variable or the number next to it. If there's parentheses, everything touches it. So the only thing that's moving to the top of the fraction is that x. So it's 4, and then the x cubed goes on top, and 2 on the bottom. Of course, I can simplify this. So my answer is 2x cubed. And we'll try just one last problem. 3x to the negative 7 over 2y to the negative 3rd, and that to the negative 3rd power. Okay, that looks ugly, but if you follow all the same rules, you'll be good to go. So this is the deal. I would draw a nice little fraction bar here, and whatever has a negative exponent goes the other side. Now, the deal is, you can't really deal with both of these together, the 2y to the negative 3rd and the negative 3rd, unless you actually multiply it out. But if I don't multiply it out, this is the deal. The 3 definitely stays there. The x to the 7th definitely goes down to the bottom. And then that 2y to the negative 3rd, that goes to the top. And you're like, well, wait a second. You just moved it, and it's still a negative 3rd. Guys, this is going to be a positive 3. So that's to the 3rd power. You can't just do both of them and make a both and say, oh, well, one's going, so the other one's automatically positive. You can't do that. The one on the outside is making it go to the other side. And now we can actually simplify a little bit. 3, and that's 2 to the 3rd, y to the negative 3rd cubed over x to the 7th. So that's equal to 3 times 8 y to the negative 9th over x to the 7th. Okay, and then your last step, of course, no negative exponents, is going to be, well, here, do 3 times 8 is 24, and everything goes to the bottom. So it's x to the 7th, y to the 9th, and that's your answer to that problem. Okay, it looked kind of complicated because you had a lot to deal with, but what happens is, if I look at the original problem, I could have, if everybody, you just kind of go back to here, what I could have done is I could have said 2 to the negative 3rd, and then what's negative 3 times negative 3? That's y to the positive 9th. And then I could have moved this to the top of the fraction, and so you got a y to 9th in the bottom and an 8 on top, which is exactly what we did here and here. Y to the 9th in the bottom, 8 on top. Okay, so you can tell there's a lot of ways to do the problems, but as long as you follow kind of a procedure, you're good to go with these problems. All right? So remember, anything to the 0 power, and I would say the most common mistake with a 0 power is saying 5 to the 0 power is 0. Okay, boo! Anything to the 0 power is 1, not 0. Very important. Or sometimes people say 5 to the 0 power is 5. But you really know that's not true. 5 to the first power is 5. Okay, not 5 to the 0. So anything to the 0 power is 1. Anything with a negative exponent, you move to the other side of the fraction, change the exponent to positive, and remember your final answer. Actually, and I probably didn't mention this either, but your final answer has no negative or 0 exponents. You're not allowed to have a 0 exponent. So I don't want to see anything with x to the 0. If it's x to the 0, that is going to be a 1. All right? That's it, math fans. Have a nice day. Goodbye.